The ideals of the American Revolution were real and they were radical. The revolution meant more than just independence from the British Empire. It also meant ideals of equality, freedom, and the expansion of democracy. These ideals truly did expand for some people in the United States, but not for everyone. Others saw many limitations to their liberty. Freedom after the revolution uh, expanded significantly for white men in particular. Ideas of equality really spread throughout the new United States. The notion of aristocracy and monarchy had been completely abandoned, and people had fought and believed in the Republican form of government, self rule. The public sphere expanded, meaning that more people were engaged in social and political life. The right to vote expanded significantly for white men as property qualifications and the amount of wealth that one owned became less important in restricting one's right to vote. And more people, more and more men could vote as long as even if they didn't have wealth or property. Religious toleration increased, especially because France, one of the United States' strongest allies during the American Revolution, was a Catholic nation. So more toleration was shown towards Catholicism. Thomas Jefferson wrote very favorably towards religious toleration and separation of church and state. And these ideas that Americans hold dear today, they were taken very seriously. Indentured servitude declined rapidly after the American Revolution. And by 1820, pretty much had ended in the United States. But other people did not fare as well. There were a lot of people whose liberties were quite limited after the American Revolution. For example, loyalists, people who had remained loyal to the British Empire. Many of the colonists had supported the resistance, but not necessarily the war. About 20% of the colonists were loyalists. They had remained loyal to the British Empire throughout the course of the American Revolution. And in fact, about 20,000 fought for the British during the war. At the end of the war, 60,000 had left, and most of them went to either Canada or to the British controlled West Indies. Some also went back to England. The ones that had to leave, or some that even stayed, saw their land taken from them and sold, saw their property taken. They lost a lot of financial wealth, and they were desperate. Here you see a loyalist being tarred and feathered by some of the revolutionaries. Native Americans were another group that lost out a lot from the American Revolution. About 200,000 Indians lived east of the Mississippi River in 1790. So this was the land that was acquired by the United States in 1783 with the Treaty of Paris that ended the war, and it was given to the United States from Britain. And there was nothing that really protected the Indian interests put in place. During the course of the fighting of the war, support of Native Americans was divided between the British and the Americans in neutrality. Basically, they were waiting to see who would win the war. And after the war, Americans were it was much easier for them to take Indian land, much easier than before. Because if you remember, the British had set barriers and limitations on Western expansion of the American colonists. Now, with the British Empire gone, the Americans were going to be able to expand westward and take more land and territory from the Native Americans. Another group that didn't fare too well with the American Revolution were slaves. In 1776, when the Declaration of Independence was written, about 500,000 slaves lived in the American colonies. Almost every founding father owned slaves. If you recall, or if you know that of the first 7 presidents of the United States, 5 had been slaveholders. So the revolutionary ideals that were real really raised questions about the issue of slavery. About 100,000 slaves fled during the American Revolution to fight for the British. They fled to the British lines for their own freedom. The North really did believe, to some extent, in the notion of freedom and really started to end slavery gradually. Um, not not immediately, but they put laws into place that would free the offspring of children who had been born to slaves. And slowly, the institution of slavery started to die out in the North. But by 1790, there were 700,000 slaves in the United States. So 14 years after the Declaration of Independence had been written, there were 200,000 more slaves in the United States than there had been previously. So the institution of slavery continued to expand even after the notions of freedom and equality, justice, liberty had been talked about so eloquently by Thomas Jefferson and the founding fathers in the Declaration of Independence. Women, finally, were another group that, in many ways, didn't gain too much from the American Revolution. Throughout the fighting and the resistance to the British, they protested, they made homespun goods to support the boycotts, they spied on the British during the war. Yet husbands still held legal power over their wives. Politics remained an all-male activity. Women, of course, still could not vote. They don't get that right for another 100 years. Although women did gain some status within the family with the concept of Republican motherhood, this was the idea that women, mothers, should become educated and be able to pass on this education to their children to prepare them to become Republican citizens. So, in regards to women being educated and passing on some of this knowledge and some of the values to children in the family, their role was elevated. Yet, outside the family, the notion of coverture remained. This was the idea that outside of their marriage, they had real no legal identity. They couldn't sign contracts without a husband signing for them. They couldn't collect their own pay. The husband was in charge of the household finances. The husband represented the family in all legal aspects, signing contracts. Women couldn't sit on juries, couldn't sue in court. They pretty much had no legal rights in the early American Republic. And this continued for years and years. So although the revolutionary ideals of the American Revolution were true, were radical, changed many people, expanded freedom, expanded liberty, expanded justice and equality, it wasn't for everyone. Not everyone um, not everyone received the benefits of these ideals, namely the loyalists, slaves, Native Americans, and women who still continued to suffer and be oppressed in American society.